In every community, it just takes a few people who have the will and the energy and the vision to create a culture. Keeping this theatre alive, it's a fantastic thing to do because so many people are affected by it.
This town has transformed itself because the coal industry has died out, and they're looking inward for resources, of course.
I mean, look at this crowd. This makes you feel good.
Such a beautiful facility. It's really a jewel in a crown for Southeast Ohio.
It's just so refreshing. I leave a concert like this and I feel completely cleansed.
We had never heard of it before, but our friends had tickets and they invited us to come. When we got here, we found this beautiful square that we didn't even know existed. It's just a gorgeous place.
It's small, the sound is really good, it's aesthetically lovely. It's wonderful.
I think it's something that we realize, maybe subconsciously, that we realize when you come into a room like this. The history, it's in the air.
When you're sitting in, the same seats that, some of your ancestors, may have sat in. I think it's kind of an interesting experience for people.
The history of Stuart's Opera House is a dramatic tale of showboats, railroads, coal, stars, and boxers. It is a story of darkness and fire, of death and rebirth. It is a story of a community dedicated to the life of an opera house. The history of Stuart's Opera House illuminates a portrait of Appalachian culture and the history of America. Before the Civil War brought in the age of the railroad industry, theater troupes traveled along canals and showboats. Nelsonville resident George Stuart owned a showboat called the Arizona. In 1869, during a rough storm, the showboat sank. George Stuart returned to Nelsonville with a dream. In this booming city, linked by rail to the outside world, George Stuart envisioned a community-based arts center. Utilizing local clay bricks, a beautiful two-story opera house was built. During its glory, the Stuart's Opera House hosted some of the top shows and performers of the era. As time wore on, the community evolved culturally and economically. In 1924, Stuart's Opera House closed its doors with all its contents left in place. Finally, in 1974, the Opera House was awakened. 50 years after the doors had closed, a nonprofit organization was determined to breathe life back into George Stuart's dream. On Monday, March 24, 1980, less than a year after the reopening, disaster struck.
The whole town came down to the square and everyone was standing around in that feeling of like, oh my God, all that hard work, and watching the smoke come up through the roof, and it was devastating.
The day of the fire, what I remember was just scary. An old historical great building in the heart of our square is going up in smoke. Everyone in the community, almost everyone, came out to see that, but it was heartbreaking because nothing we could do, to stand and look.
It took 5 hours for 150 firefighters to extinguish the blaze. Damage was estimated at $1 million. No definite cause was ever discovered, but faulty old wiring between layers of drop ceiling was suspected. Only the balcony, dressing rooms, first floor stores, and the brick shell were intact.
So there was discussion inside the community as to what to do with this space, and then there was a group of citizens and artists and caring persons that said, well, we can build it back to what it was. So the seed just started to grow.
The rebuilding and restoration commenced quickly, but took a number of years.
I would walk by here and I wonder when the doors are going to open. I wonder when something's going to happen.
Finally, in 1994, a financial windfall put the restoration over the edge, and the project was completed with the doors opening in 1997. None of the events in the recent history of Stuart's Opera House was inevitable. Stuart's might easily be nothing more than a memory, a history, and a parking lot.
This is a neutral zone. Politics kind of stand still on stage. Economy, a lot of those things kind of just that frustrate everybody and propel a community to just kind of go by the wayside and give way to performance. So I understand the feeling of breathing life back into a house like this.
The thing that we so easily forget is the enrichment of culture that this type venue brings to the youth today and to those of us who aren't so young.
We on the square, and Stuart's included, have all collaborated to put together a summer arts program for the children in the community because they don't have art in school.
Having a facility that invites a young person to have that experience here in a setting that, and the fact that it's connected, it's their own, I think enriches the experience for young people.
For all of us here like every night, so this place is kind of like a second home to me.
I think it's just a remarkable program, and to see the students expand what's in there already, to pull a great resource together and do something really awesome.
Exposure to the arts, I think, is an essential part of any person's development.
It's very, very important that communities like this, that centres like this exist as a real lodestone for people. It pulls in performers and it pulls in audiences and it creates a real culture. Very, very important.
This great building here that still is active through all of the troubles, I think it's pretty special, and I think 100 years from now, people are going to shake their heads and say, wow, a lot was happening in Nelsonville back around the turn of the last century.
Well, we're going to play to the forgotten people. But what I found when I went beyond the obvious big towns, I found the remnants of America, the old America, the American spirit that I love, the American spirit that I was drawn to when I was a young person traveling on the road for the first time. It was towns like this.